On a warm summer afternoon in early July of the year 2003, a quiet neighborhood in San Jose, California, found itself pulled into one of the most intense manhunts the city had seen in decades. It began, not with sirens or frantic phone calls, but with a 9-year-old girl stepping off her school bus, completely unaware that she was walking straight into the darkest moment of her life. Her name was Jeanette Tamayo, a shy, bright, soft-spoken child who loved helping her mother cook, who played with her pets every morning before school, and who dreamed of becoming a doctor. She had no idea that within minutes, her home would become a crime scene. She had no idea that the next several days would test her strength beyond anything a child should ever endure. And she certainly had no idea that her own courage and intelligence would later help bring a dangerous man to justice. This is one of the most astonishing survival stories in modern American crime history. A story where a little girl terrified and alone would end up doing what trained adults often cannot. A story where presence of mind, bravery, and quick thinking made the difference between being lost forever and coming home alive. Welcome to Beyond the Case. Before we begin, remember to like, comment, and hit the subscribe button so you never miss another deep dive into real, verified true crime stories. Now, let's go back to the beginning. It was Monday, the 7th day of July, 2003. School had just let out for the day. The sun hung lazily over San Jose, casting long shadows across the familiar streets Jeanette walked every afternoon. She followed her usual route home, her backpack bouncing gently at her side, her mind drifting between the cartoons she planned to watch and the snacks she hoped her mom had prepared. As she approached her house, nothing appeared unusual at first glance. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet, perhaps, but nothing out of the ordinary enough to cause alarm. Children were inside avoiding the heat, adults were still at work, and the street looked like it always did, calm, safe. But then Jeanette noticed the first detail. The small thing that didn't feel right. The front screen door was slightly ajar. Her mother always closed it. Her family was careful about safety. But Jeanette assumed maybe someone was home early, maybe her mother, maybe her older brother Paul. Still, something felt off, even if she couldn't put it into words yet. She took a breath, pushed the door open wider, and stepped inside. The house was quiet, too quiet. Jeanette set her backpack down and walked down the hallway toward her bedroom. That was when she froze. Her window was shattered. Pieces of glass scattered across the floor like sharp, glittering snow. Her curtains swayed slightly, as though recently disturbed. Her heart began to race. She didn't understand what had happened, only that something was very wrong. Her first instinct was to call her mother. She rushed to the living room, grabbed the phone, and realized the phone line had been cut. The cable dangled loosely, sliced clean through. At that exact moment, before she had time to decide what to do, she heard a knock at the front door. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Jeanette slowly turned. A stranger stood on the other side of the screen, a man she had never seen before. He asked her a question, a casual question at first, but something in his voice, something in his posture, felt wrong. Jeanette's hands trembled. She tried to back away, to close the door, to do anything. But the man pushed the screen aside, and within seconds, the quiet suburban home became the center of a terrifying crime. We will not describe anything graphic, but we will follow the real, documented events. The intruder forced his way inside. Jeanette was overpowered. She was only 9 years old. She could not defend herself. The man restrained her and dragged her through the house toward the garage. The last thing she saw before losing sight of her home was the familiar hallway, her mother's decorations on the wall, everyday pieces of a life she suddenly feared she would never see again. Then the garage door rumbled open a few inches. Jeanette heard a voice she would recognize anywhere. Her mother, Rosalia. Her brother, Paul. They had arrived home at the worst possible moment. Chaos exploded. A desperate struggle. Attempts to defend Jeanette. A violent confrontation. The injuries the family suffered were serious, but everyone survived a miracle considering the circumstances. But the attackers succeeded in escaping with Jeanette. Within minutes, the car disappeared from the neighborhood, leaving behind a devastated mother, an injured brother, and a police department now racing against time. By that evening, the police had declared Jeanette a kidnapped child, and the investigation began immediately, though many obstacles stood in the way. There was no clear description of the suspect, no clear vehicle information, and due to state laws at the time, an Amber Alert could not yet be issued. Still, detectives pushed forward. Bloodhounds searched the area. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood. Nearby security footage was reviewed. A blurry video clip showed the attacker's car, but the quality was too low to read the license plate. The case was starting on the weakest foundation possible. But the police didn't know yet that the key to solving the case wasn't in their forensic labs. It was in the terrified 9-year-old girl currently being driven away. A little girl who, even in her fear, was quietly observing everything, counting turns, memorizing details, planning. Jeanette Tamayo was frightened, but she was not giving up. As the sun dipped below the San Jose skyline, the city lights flickered to life. But across the city, inside an unmarked car speeding through residential streets, 9-year-old Jeanette Tamayo sat in the back seat, restrained, terrified, and unsure where she was being taken. Every second felt like a lifetime. She wanted to scream. She wanted to fight. But above all, she wanted to survive. With her hands bound and her mind racing, Jeanette forced herself to stay calm. Even at her young age, she understood something instinctively. If she panicked, she would lose the only advantage she still had, her ability to think. She took silent breaths. She kept her eyes open. And she began to pay attention. The car made a right turn, then a left, then another left. Jeanette didn't know the street names, but she watched the passing houses, the way the sunlight hit the pavement, the color of the buildings. She looked for landmarks, anything that could help later. Each clue became a piece of a mental map. Later, officers would say that her awareness was extraordinary, almost unheard of for a child in such a frightening situation. But even more astonishing was what she would do with that awareness. Back at the Tamayo home, investigators were met with one of the most chaotic crime scenes they had ever seen. There was damage in multiple rooms, signs of a break-in, signs of a struggle, a frightened mother and an injured 15-year-old boy being rushed to the hospital. Detective Heather Randall, who would later lead the case, described the moment she walked into the home as stepping straight into a storm. Everywhere she looked, there were indicators of violence, but strangely, there was almost no evidence pointing to who took Jeanette. The intruder had left no weapon behind. No car was identified. No license plate. No fingerprints that could be immediately traced. For detectives, it was a nightmare scenario. A violent abduction with almost no usable leads. But time was the real enemy. Every passing hour reduced the chances of finding Jeanette alive. And as the first night approached, the entire city braced for what might come next. Jeanette felt the vehicle slowing down as it approached a residential area she didn't recognize. Finally, the car turned into a driveway. Then, the sound of a garage opening. The world outside faded as the garage door sealed them in darkness. When the car stopped, the man got out, opened the back door, and carried Jeanette inside a house she had never seen before, up a narrow staircase, down a hallway, into a locked room. The door shut behind her. The lock clicked. Silence followed. This was the moment most victims lose hope. But Jeanette did something unexpected. She scanned the room. A small window, a bed, a tiny bathroom, a television. No obvious escape. But she kept observing. Every detail mattered. She figured out how the door locked, how long the attacker stayed before leaving, how often he went downstairs. She watched him, not with panic, but with purpose. That purpose would later become her greatest weapon. At the hospital, Rosalia Tamayo refused to rest. She could barely speak, but she kept repeating the same sentences. My daughter. My daughter. My daughter. Please find her. She is only a little girl. Doctors urged her to rest. But how could any mother sleep, knowing her child had been taken by a violent stranger? Her son, Paul, despite his own injuries, insisted on talking to officers too. His memory of the man was blurry, but he tried his best to describe him. Unfortunately, like most traumatic events, the details were scattered and unclear. Hours passed, then more hours, then a full night. Still no sign of Jeanette. Detective Randall later admitted, "It was one of those cases you feel in your gut. We didn't want to say it, but we were all afraid for her." The fear wasn't unfounded. Statistics were grim. In abduction cases, the first 24 hours are critical. After 48 hours, survival rates drop drastically. But there was something different about this case, something nobody knew yet. Jeanette wasn't waiting to be saved. She was preparing. By the morning of the 8th day of July, 2003, the city of San Jose was fully mobilized. Local news stations broadcast Jeanette's picture every hour. Helicopters circled neighborhoods with loudspeakers. Officers handed out flyers at shopping centers, gas stations, parks, everywhere. The entire community felt the urgency. Inside the locked room, Jeanette could hear faint echoes of the outside world through the small window. She didn't know exactly what was happening, but she sensed something. People were looking for her, hard. This gave her strength. She decided she had to stay alert, stay aware, and if she could study her captor, he wasn't expecting that. Most abductors assume their victims are too frightened to think clearly. But Jeanette was different. She asked simple questions. She pretended to be calm. She tried to sound friendly, not because she trusted him, but because she wanted him to trust her. She was playing a game of psychological survival, one small move at a time. Back at the police station, frustration grew. The blurry driveway camera footage provided almost nothing. The lack of an Amber Alert due to state requirements slowed the spread of information. And without vehicle details, detectives were relying almost entirely on luck. But Detective Randall refused to give up. She kept pushing interviews, neighborhood sweeps, forensic checks. Nothing. Jeanette had been missing for nearly a full day. Still no breakthrough. Until the pizza clue. On the second day of captivity, Jeanette's captor asked an unexpected question. "Are you hungry?" She quietly said yes. He handed her a cell phone. He dialed a pizza place in the area, and he made her order the food herself. When the person on the phone asked for the address, the attacker recited it out loud. Jeanette listened carefully. Every number, every word, every syllable. She didn't know what it meant yet, but she memorized it. It was the single most important detail of the entire case, and she understood that at 9 years old, this address, this moment, this decision to remember, would later bring her home. An hour later, a pizza delivery driver arrived at the house. He left a box at the door on top of it, a missing flyer the restaurant had seen on the news. When the attacker returned to the room with the box, everything changed. Inside that room, Jeanette saw a photograph of herself on the flyer. Her own face. Under the word, missing. The attacker panicked. He told her plainly, "I have to get rid of you tonight." Jeanette felt her stomach drop, but her fear shifted quickly into resolve. She had prepared for this moment. She had memorized the address. She had counted the turns. She had watched his habits, timing, behavior. Now, with her life in immediate danger, she made a decision. She was going to act. And what she chose to do next would shock detectives, the public, and even seasoned investigators across California. But more importantly, it would save her life. By the evening of the 9th day of July, 2003, the atmosphere inside the small upstairs room had changed. The air felt heavier, thicker, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension. Jeanette Tamayo understood why. Her captor had seen the flyer, her face, her name, her city, all printed clearly on the box sitting at the foot of the bed. Every law enforcement agency, from San Jose to the Bay Area, was now involved in the search. And the man who held her captive suddenly realized the entire region was looking for one person, her. Fear can push people toward two extremes. They either run, or they become even more dangerous. Jeanette could sense which direction he was leaning. As her captor muttered to himself in the corner of the room, Jeanette sat very still on the bed. Her small hands were folded tightly in her lap, her breathing strained and uneven. She knew he was agitated. She knew something was coming, and she understood that whatever happened next could determine whether she lived or died. This was the moment her survival instincts sharpened to their highest point. She forced herself to think clearly. Stay calm. Pretend to cooperate. Don't show fear. Make him trust you. Watch everything. Remember everything. Jeanette didn't know it then, but these decisions made by a 9-year-old under unimaginable pressure mirrored the survival tactics taught to adults in high-risk hostage situations. What she was doing was extraordinary. Minutes later, her captor stepped out of the room to go downstairs. Before the door could fully latch shut, Jeanette's eyes darted to her wrists. The handcuffs. From the very beginning, she had noticed something about them. They weren't heavy police-grade metal cuffs. They were lighter, almost like an off-brand model. And more importantly, she felt a latch, a small release mechanism she could press with her fingertip. She didn't try it earlier. She feared he would catch her. But now, for the first time, she was alone. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "Please work." She felt for the tiny metal catch, pressed, shifted the latch sideways. Click. The cuff loosened. Her heart nearly stopped. She was free, and she had no more than a minute. Jeanette understood what many adults could not. If she escaped but police couldn't identify the kidnapper, he might never be caught. So she did something that would later astonish investigators. She began collecting evidence. First, a watch the attacker left on the nightstand. Second, a small toy turtle he had put in the room. She thought maybe it held fingerprints, or maybe police could trace where it came from. Third, she grabbed her own clothing, knowing it might hold important DNA or fibers. She tucked everything into her pockets, working fast but silently. Her hands trembled, but her mind remained locked in survival mode. Then she heard footsteps. Heavy, slow, coming up the stairs. Jeanette jumped back onto the bed and relatched the cuffs around her wrist. Not tightly, just enough to look convincing. The door opened. Her captor stared at her. She returned his gaze with the most innocent expression she could manage. And, to her relief, he believed her. While Jeanette strategized inside the locked room, the situation outside grew more desperate. 48 hours had passed since the kidnapping. Detective Heather Randall stood in front of the police department's whiteboard, now covered in photos, notes, and a timeline. But there were almost no leads, no witness sightings, no suspects with motive, no matching vehicle, no fingerprints that connected to a criminal record, no Amber Alert. The FBI had now joined the case, offering additional resources, but even they admitted the investigation was running thin. For Rosalia, Jeanette's mother, each hour felt like a lifetime. She clutched a rosary in her hands as she sat in her hospital bed, repeating the same prayer over and over. Please bring her back. Please bring my daughter home. Little did she know that at that exact moment, her daughter was preparing the very plan that would reunite them. Inside the house, Jeanette's captor paced back and forth. He avoided eye contact. He sighed nervously. He muttered to himself about people watching and the police getting too close. She knew what this meant. He felt cornered. A cornered criminal is unpredictable, the most dangerous kind. But Jeanette continued the strategy that had kept her alive so far. Stay calm. Speak softly. Don't provoke him. And always, always watch for an opportunity. Then, something unexpected happened. He asked her, "Are you hungry?" Jeanette nodded. The man handed her the same cell phone and told her to call the pizza place again. This time, she knew the significance of every second of that call. Every sentence. Every address detail. She memorized not just the numbers, but the rhythm of how he said them. Street name, house number, city, zip code. Each piece locked into her memory like puzzle pieces snapping into place. She wasn't just a hostage anymore. She was the key witness this entire case desperately needed. When the pizza arrived, the moment that would alter the entire case unfolded. The delivery driver placed the box at the door, but he also placed the missing flyer on top. Her photo, her name, her description. Her captor stared at the image for a long time. Then he told her the words that sent a cold wave through her body. "I'm getting rid of you tonight." Jeanette felt a terror she had never felt before. But at the same time, something else rose within her. Strength, determination, resolve. This was no longer a matter of fear. This was a matter of survival. She reminded herself of something she had heard family members say countless times. Tamayos are fighters. She believed it. Later that evening, the man returned to the room, holding a pillow. He pressed it toward her face. Without going into graphic detail, it was clear that he intended to harm her. Jeanette struggled to breathe, not physically described, but emotionally, psychologically. Her mind raced. Not yet. Not like this. I'm not done. Summoning every ounce of adrenaline her small body could produce, she turned her head enough to gasp for air, just enough to survive the attempt. It was a terrifying moment, but it also revealed something important. Her captor was panicking, and panic causes mistakes. A short time later, as the sun faded and darkness filled the house, a loud knock echoed from downstairs. Jeanette froze. Her captor rushed to her side and clamped a hand over her mouth, warning her not to make a sound. She didn't scream, but she listened. She heard the knocking again. Persistent, firm, close. Someone was at the door. A neighbor? A delivery driver? The police? She didn't know. But the knocking grew louder and longer. Her captor panicked. When the knocking finally stopped, he was sweating, shaking, pacing. This moment, this knock, triggered his final decision. He wasn't going to stay. He was going to flee. And he couldn't flee with her in the house. He would either take her with him or dispose of her first. Jeanette needed a miracle. And she got one, but not the kind anyone expected. When the house finally grew quiet again, the man grabbed Jeanette by the arm and told her they were leaving. He put her back in handcuffs, led her downstairs, to the garage, into the car. The garage door opened. Cold night air flowed in. The engine started. Jeanette's heart pounded. This was it. The moment everything in her young life had prepared her for. She whispered to herself, "Stay awake, pay attention, remember everything." Because she realized something important. Whatever happened next, someone, somewhere, would need to know how to find this house. She wasn't done fighting. Not even close. Nightfall swept over California as the car carrying 9-year-old Jeanette Tamayo pulled away from the house where she had been held captive. Streetlights streaked across the windows. Cold wind seeped through the tiny gaps in the doorframe. The hum of the highway grew louder with every mile. Jeanette didn't know where she was being taken. She didn't know if she was being moved, or if this was the end. But one thing she did know and held on to with unshakable determination. She refused to leave this world without fighting back. As the car accelerated, Jeanette's captor gripped the steering wheel tightly, his breathing fast and uneven. He kept checking his mirrors, scanning the road, muttering anxiously under his breath. He was no longer in control. He was afraid. Jeanette noticed everything: his tone, the speed of the car, the way he avoided streetlights and busy roads. This wasn't the confident, calculated man who had abducted her. This was a man unraveling. Every sharp turn burned another detail into her memory. Every long stretch of road added another piece to her mental map. She didn't know it yet, but these observations would later lead police directly to the suspect's home before they even had an address. Her mind was working overtime, fueled by fear, but also by courage. The car slowed. It drifted toward the shoulder of the road. The engine rumbled as the vehicle came to a stop under the neon glow of a liquor store sign. Jeanette swallowed hard. Why here? Why now? Her captor leaned toward her. His voice was quiet, almost eerily calm. He told her he was letting her go. But then he leaned closer and issued a threat, one that would stay with her for years. A threat we will keep non-graphic, but one that made it clear. If she ever revealed who he was, if she ever spoke about what happened, He would come back. Jeanette was frozen with fear. But she also felt something else. Relief. She was still alive. When the car door unlocked and opened, she didn't hesitate. She stepped out into the cold night air. And then she ran. The glass door of the liquor store slid open with a chime. Inside, bright fluorescent lights washed over rows of snacks, drinks, and lottery tickets. Behind the counter stood a cashier preparing to close for the night. When he looked up, he froze. A small girl, trembling, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic, stood in the doorway. He recognized her immediately. He had seen her face on the news earlier that day. "You're the girl, the missing girl," he whispered. Jeanette nodded frantically. The cashier rushed toward her, guided her behind the counter, and handed her a phone. She tried to dial, but her hands shook so violently she couldn't press the buttons correctly. She was exhausted, terrified, overwhelmed. The cashier took the phone gently from her hands. "It's okay," he said. "I've got it." He dialed 911. Those 3 numbers would set off a chain reaction that would change everything. The call was recorded, calm but urgent. "A little girl just came into the store," the cashier told the operator. I think she's the one who's been all over the news. The one from San Jose." The operator immediately dispatched units. Within minutes, the area lit up with the flashing blue and red of police cruisers. Jeanette, still shaking, held onto the counter for support. She had survived, but she was not done yet. Because even now, even in her exhausted, traumatized state, she remembered the evidence she had hidden in her pockets. And she knew the police would need it. Detective Heather Randall was in her patrol car when the radio call came through. "Missing girl located. East Palo Alto. Alive." She didn't wait for backup. She drove straight to the scene. When she walked into the store and saw Jeanette standing there, alive, shivering, silently crying, it was a moment she would later describe as the greatest relief I have ever felt in my career. Randall approached slowly, kneeling to Jeanette's eye level. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly. "My name is Heather. I'm here to help you. You're safe now." Jeanette wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve, hesitated, then spoke the words that stunned everyone in the store. "I have evidence." Detective Randall blinked. "What did you say, honey?" Jeanette reached into her pockets and began pulling out item after item. The watch, the small toy turtle, her clothing, other objects she took from the room. Each piece carefully carried, protected, hidden, and remembered. Detective Randall stared in disbelief. Children in abduction cases almost never gather evidence. They almost never think to collect objects that could identify their captor. But Jeanette did. This wasn't just a survivor. This was a child who had solved her own case. At the police station, officers wrapped Jeanette in a blanket and gave her water. She was exhausted, but still alert. Detective Randall asked softly, "Sweetheart, do you think you could help us figure out where he took you?" Jeanette nodded. She asked for paper and a pencil, and then she began to draw. Not just a house, not just a street. She drew the number of turns they took, the direction each turn went, the highway exit, the neighborhood layout, the shape of the building, a sketch of the garage, the color of the front door, the location of the stairs, the layout of the upstairs hallway. Investigators watched in astonishment. Adult witnesses rarely provide this level of detail. Jeanette, 9 years old, remembered nearly everything. Detective Randall bent down and asked, "Jeanette, do you think you can find the house if we drive with you?" The room fell silent. Jeanette looked up. She nodded, not with fear, but with determination. Minutes later, Jeanette was seated in the back of a patrol car with Detective Randall beside her. The car pulled out of the station. Jeanette pressed her face to the window and began giving directions. Left, right, straight, turn here, stop. That's the exit. Go down this street. Now turn. That house. That's it. As they rolled to a stop in front of the driveway, Jeanette pointed at a white house with a closed garage door. "That's where he kept me." Detective Randall radioed the location instantly. Seconds later, dozens of units surrounded the street. SWAT teams assembled. K-9 units prepared. Lights went out. Guns were drawn. Shields raised. This was no longer a missing child case. This was a manhunt. And Jeanette Tamayo had just brought police directly to the suspect's door. As the police convoy settled into position around the quiet residential street, the tension in the air was unmistakable. Dozens of officers moved into formation with precision. Lights were cut. Radios hushed. Bulletproof vests tightened. Inside one of the patrol vehicles, 9-year-old Jeanette Tamayo sat wrapped in a blanket, watching silently as law enforcement surrounded the house she had been held captive in. She had pointed out the exact driveway, the exact window, the exact house. And now, for the first time since her ordeal began, Jeanette saw adults trained, capable, heavily equipped adults taking control of the situation. Detective Heather Randall rested a hand on her shoulder. "You did incredible," she whispered. "We're going to get him." The tactical team assembled at the end of the driveway. Shields, helmets, K-9 units straining quietly against their handlers' grips. Officers poised at every angle of the home. A commanding officer gave the silent hand signal. 3, 2, 1. Police. Search warrant. The explosion of energy that followed was immediate and overwhelming. The front door was breached. A flashbang ignited inside. Officers flowed into the living room and hallways with intense, controlled precision. Every room was searched. Every closet. Every corner. The house was small, but built with multiple hiding spots. The upstairs bedroom, Jeanette's holding room, was discovered exactly as she had described. The layout was nearly identical to the diagram she had drawn earlier that night. Her notes, her memory, her courage, all of it had been accurate. But the suspect was nowhere in sight. A SWAT officer paused beneath a faint scuffling sound above. The attic. He signaled to his team. A ladder was placed. An officer climbed upward slowly. 2 more aimed flashlights and rifles at the opening. The attic hatch was pulled down. And there he was. A man crouched among insulation and wooden beams, attempting to hide behind a support post. The suspect, the man who broke into the Tamayo house, who abducted a child, who attacked her family, who held Jeanette captive for days. Officers shouted commands. "Show your hands. Don't move." Now, but the suspect refused to comply. He threatened the officers, tried to retreat farther, tensed his muscles to resist. The K-9 handler gave a single command. Seconds later, the dog leaped into the attic with controlled force, ensuring the suspect could not fight, escape, or harm anyone. Officers took him into custody. The man who caused so much terror in the San Jose community was finally under arrest. The man arrested that night was identified as David Montiel Cruz, a 24-year-old resident of the Bay Area. Public records later showed a troubled history, instability, and indicators of escalating violent behavior. But until this case, he had never been connected to anything as severe as the kidnapping and assault of a child. Still, the evidence collected both from the home and from Jeanette's pockets would leave little doubt about his guilt. As officers brought him down the ladder and into the cold night air, several bystanders gathered at a distance. They watched silently as Cruz was escorted to a waiting patrol car, his arms restrained, his face expressionless. For the community, this marked the end of fear. For the police, it marked the beginning of justice. For Jeanette, it marked the moment she could finally begin to breathe again. While Cruz was transported to a secure facility, detectives moved through the rest of the home gathering evidence. Every detail in the house confirmed Jeanette's testimony. The upstairs room, with the small window and bed. The narrow staircase she described. The bathroom attached to the room. The toys she mentioned. The shower fixtures she remembered. The watch she had taken. The objects she hid inside the pizza box. Detective Randall pushed open the door to the small bedroom and immediately noticed something under the bed. The pizza box. She lifted the lid, and inside were the items Jeanette had gathered before the attempted smothering. The toys, the clothing, the clues she worked so hard to save. Detective Randall later said, "She was thinking like a detective. It was astonishing. For a 9-year-old, she was the reason we caught him so fast." Every officer in the room understood the same thing. Jeanette Tamayo had not just survived, she had preserved the evidence that would secure the arrest and conviction of her abductor. As the SWAT team processed the scene, another convoy of officers drove Jeanette back toward safety. She sat quietly, staring out the window as the city lights passed by. Detective Randall remained beside her, speaking gently, asking if she needed water, or rest, or quiet. Jeanette asked only one question: "Are my mom and brother okay?" The detective squeezed her hand. "They're alive, sweetheart. They've been looking for you nonstop." Relief washed over Jeanette's face. She leaned against the seat, finally allowing herself to rest. The longest ride of her life was over. When the police vehicle arrived at the hospital in San Jose, the scene inside was emotional, overwhelming, and unforgettable. Doctors, nurses, officers, and family members gathered as Jeanette stepped out of the car. Her mother, still bandaged, still weak, still shaken, burst into tears as she embraced her daughter. Jeanette held on tightly, burying her face into her mother's shoulder. For a moment, the world stood still. Her brother Paul, limping and bruised, hugged her next, whispering, "You're safe. You're safe now." The Tamayo family, broken and battered but alive, was finally reunited. After the arrest, detectives transported the evidence to a secure forensic laboratory. Jeanette's testimony, her drawings, the pizza order, the phone number, the physical evidence, the fingerprints, the items collected from the attic, the damaged windows and broken doors, the 911 call, the hospital records, everything aligned into one of the most solid cases law enforcement could ask for. Prosecutors moved quickly, and within days, a full list of charges was filed against David Montiel Cruz, including kidnapping, false imprisonment, multiple counts of child endangerment, residential burglary, assault charges related to the attacks on Rosalia and Paul. These charges would later be expanded after further investigation. Cruz faced decades behind bars. He would not walk free again. As news broke that Jeanette had been found alive, the city of San Jose erupted in relief. Schools held assemblies. Local news stations ran continuous coverage. Community members held prayer vigils and neighborhood gatherings. Flyers of Jeanette were replaced with signs that read, "Found, safe. Welcome home, Jeanette, our fighter." The entire community celebrated the bravery of a child who had demonstrated courage far beyond her years. Detective Randall, exhausted but emotional, later stood at a press conference. When asked how Jeanette survived, she said, "Her courage saved her. Her intelligence saved her. She led us straight to him. She did everything right." Those words would echo across news broadcasts nationwide. Jeanette Tamayo wasn't just a missing child recovered alive. She was a survivor, a fighter, a witness, and a hero in her own story. The arrest of David Montiel Cruz marked the end of one nightmare, but the beginning of another journey. A journey of healing, a journey of justice, a journey of rebuilding the lives of a family that had been pushed to its absolute limit. But this journey would also highlight something extraordinary: the power of a child's courage. Because even now, days after her rescue, Jeanette Tamayo continued to show a clarity and strength that stunned everyone around her. This is where the story shifts from the fear she endured to the heroism she embodied. Several days after the rescue, when doctors cleared Jeanette to leave the hospital, her family prepared her home for her return. But the house did not feel like the place she left on that Monday afternoon. Broken glass had been swept away, damaged doors replaced, blood cleaned, walls repainted, locks upgraded. Yet there was still an air of heaviness, a reminder of what had happened inside those walls. When Jeanette walked in, she instinctively held her mother's hand tighter. Her bedroom window, once a place where sunlight poured in every morning, was now fixed with reinforced glass. Her brother's room, the scene of the initial struggle, had been repaired, but the emotional memory remained. Despite all this, Jeanette walked through the house with grace. She was not defeated. She was home. Meanwhile, investigators continued piecing together the full picture of what happened inside the captor's house. Detectives executed a second, more thorough search warrant days after the arrest. This time, they cataloged everything: clothing fibers, digital devices, tools, items in the garage, the car used in the abduction, trace evidence in the attic, neighbor testimonies, phone records. Every piece helped reconstruct the full timeline of the crime. The evidence was overwhelming. Cruz had meticulously planned the break-in. He waited for Jeanette to come home. He cut the phone wires. He hid in the house before grabbing her. But he failed to anticipate one thing: that the child he abducted would become the key witness in his downfall. In the days following her rescue, specially trained forensic interviewers sat with Jeanette to gather her testimony in a safe, structured, non-traumatic environment. Experts expected her to provide a few fragmented details, but she offered far more than that. She recounted the number of turns they took, the neighborhood layout, the color of the walls, the order of events, the location of the objects she hid, the pizza order, the cell phone number, the layout of the staircase and hallway, specific toys and items inside the room. Her level of recall shocked even veteran investigators. One forensic psychologist later commented, "Jeanette demonstrated cognitive processing, memory retention, and situational awareness far beyond her age." Her testimony was crucial. For prosecutors, her statements built a case so strong that conviction was almost guaranteed. As the case moved into the courtroom, the charges against Cruz multiplied. He faced kidnapping, false imprisonment, child endangerment, assault with force, residential burglary, criminal threats, and additional charges related to the physical struggle with Jeanette's family. Prosecutors emphasized how violent and premeditated the attack was. Defense attorneys had little room to argue. The evidence was stacked too high. Jeanette's testimony, the pizza order, his phone number, physical evidence from the house, items recovered from Jeanette's pockets, fingerprints, DNA from various surfaces, and the attempted smothering described by Jeanette in non-graphic terms. The prosecution built a narrative clear as daylight. Cruz acted alone. Cruz planned the abduction. Cruz intended harm. And Cruz was solely responsible. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Cruz eventually entered a guilty plea as part of a negotiated agreement. There would be no trial, no drawn-out legal battle, no forcing Jeanette to testify in open court. The plea ensured he would spend many years behind bars, years measured in decades, not single digits. For the Tamayo family, the sentencing brought closure. For the community, it brought relief. And for Jeanette, it brought safety. She would never have to face him again. After the legal process ended, the next chapter for the Tamayo family was emotional recovery. The physical injuries to Rosalia and Paul healed quickly, but emotional recovery, that took time. The family attended counseling sessions together. Jeanette received specialized trauma support designed for children recovering from intense, life-threatening situations. Therapists focused on building her sense of security, trust, and emotional stability. A surprising thing happened during these sessions. Jeanette didn't break down. Instead, she spoke calmly, thoughtfully, with wisdom far beyond her age. Her counselor once noted, Jeanette had every reason to collapse emotionally. Instead, she rose. This resilience would become a defining part of her character. San Jose rallied behind the Tamayo family. Neighbors brought food. Schools held assemblies. Local churches prayed for healing. Community centers hosted fundraisers to support recovery costs. People mailed cards, letters, and drawings for Jeanette. Some wrote messages like, "We cried when we saw you were safe. You are a hero. We believe in your strength. San Jose stands with you." For a little girl who had been isolated and terrified for days, This outpouring of love mattered deeply. It reminded her she wasn't alone. Jeanette's abduction exposed a flaw in California's Amber Alert rules at the time. Back then, an Amber Alert could only be issued if authorities had a suspect's name, or a license plate, or a specific vehicle description. But in Jeanette's case, police had none of these details. Her kidnapping could not trigger an alert, and that delay cost valuable time. After media attention grew, lawmakers reviewed the case carefully. This led to important changes. Amber Alert criteria were expanded to allow greater flexibility, ensuring future cases would not be blocked by technicalities. Jeanette's case became one of the catalysts for modernizing statewide child alert systems. Her survival didn't just save her own life. It helped protect countless children in the years that followed. Criminal psychologists, detectives, and forensic specialists continued analyzing the case for years. Every expert echoed the same sentiment. Jeanette's actions directly saved her life. Her strategic thinking, her calm under pressure, her ability to build trust, her memory, her quick decision-making, her bravery in collecting evidence, her precision in recalling directions, her ability to stay rational in moments of terror. One expert said, she responded with the instincts of a trained adult, not a child. Her intelligence changed the outcome of this case. Jeanette was more than a survivor. She was a phenomenon. As the years passed, Jeanette grew into a strong, confident young woman. She spoke publicly about her experience, always with grace, dignity, and strength. Never graphic, never sensationalized, always focused on hope, healing, and resilience. Her story inspired child safety training programs, law enforcement lectures, crime prevention seminars, school awareness campaigns, survivor support initiatives. Jeanette became a symbol of courage, a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, human resilience can shine through in extraordinary ways. By the time the legal process was complete and the emotional recovery began to take root, one truth stood above all others. Jeanette Tamayo survived not because she was lucky. She survived because she was brave, because she was smart, because she refused to give up, because she fought for herself, because she believed in her own strength, even when the world felt impossibly dark. Her story is not just a tragedy, it is a triumph. A story of a child who became her own protector. A story of a family that refused to let fear consume them. A story of a community that rallied. A story of justice delivered. A story that changed laws and lives. And most importantly, a story that ended with hope. The story of Jeanette Tamayo began as a tragedy. A child taken from her home. A family brutally attacked. A community shaken to its core. But like all powerful stories, the ending did not belong to darkness. It belonged to resilience, to intelligence, to hope, to love, to a community that refused to stop searching, and to a young girl who refused to give up. The following years would prove just how deeply the world was touched by her courage. After the case ended, the Tamayo family spent years healing. For a long time, loud noises would startle them. Unexpected knocks at the door made their hearts race. Certain smells or sounds reminded them of the day their lives were shattered. But slowly, day by day, they rebuilt their sense of safety. Rosalia, Jeanette's mother, became an advocate for child safety and family awareness. Her strength became a guiding light for others who had survived trauma. Paul, the brother who had fought to protect his sister with everything he had, carried his own scars, but he also carried a quiet pride. His bravery helped save Jeanette's life. And Jeanette, she grew stronger with every passing year. As she entered her teenage years, Jeanette began speaking publicly, not to relive the horror, not to sensationalize the story, but to remind others, survivors are not defined by what happened to them, but by the strength they show afterward. Her message was clear. I was a child. I was afraid. But I learned that courage isn't something big or loud. Sometimes courage is the tiny voice inside you that says, keep going, even when everything hurts. Audiences listened. Schools invited her. Parents thanked her. Survivors found inspiration in her strength. Every time she shared her story, more people understood the importance of alert systems, child protection, community awareness, and never ignoring the small signs that something might be wrong. Jeanette never considered herself a symbol, but her story helped change lives and save them. One of the most profound legacies of Jeanette's abduction was the impact on California's Amber Alert laws. Before her case, strict requirements prevented alerts from being issued without specific details, like a vehicle description, a license plate, or the suspect's name. Jeanette's situation exposed the flaw in that system. Police had a child missing, a violent break-in, a severely injured family, and overwhelming evidence of abduction. But no Amber Alert could go out. Because of this, lawmakers rewrote the criteria. The new rules allow alerts based on credible abduction evidence, not just vehicle information. Jeanette's case literally changed the way California protects its children. Her survival reshaped a statewide system ensuring no future abduction case would be slowed down by a technicality. She didn't just survive her ordeal. She helped prevent the next one. As for David Montiel Cruz, the man convicted of kidnapping Jeanette, he received a long-term prison sentence, measured in decades. He will remain behind bars for the majority of his life. He will never have the opportunity to harm another family again. And while courts do not erase trauma, justice provides something equally important: closure. Knowing that the man who caused so much suffering will never touch another child again brought immeasurable relief to the Tamayo family. It allowed them to rebuild, to breathe, to sleep without fear. Experts would continue referencing Jeanette's actions for years. Her ability to memorize directions, keep track of time, gather evidence, observe behavior, build false trust, stay calm enough to think critically. These were the actions of someone with extraordinary mental strength. Many adults in the same situation would not have been able to do what she did. Her survival became the subject of lectures, case studies, and training for law enforcement. In every analysis, one truth echoed louder than the rest. Jeanette saved herself. She was only 9 years old, but she made decisions that altered the outcome of an entire investigation. As the years passed, Jeanette chose hope. She chose healing. She chose to keep living, keep dreaming, keep moving forward. She built friendships. She pursued her education. She rediscovered laughter. She embraced her future. Her story is not defined by fear. It is defined by strength, defined by heroism, defined by the quiet bravery of a 9-year-old who refused to let darkness win. In July of 2003, a child stepped off a school bus and unknowingly walked into a nightmare. But she emerged from that nightmare with courage the world would never forget. Jeanette Tamayo's story is one of the most remarkable cases in true crime history, not because of the cruelty she endured, but because of the strength she showed. A little girl who memorized every turn, who gathered evidence while in captivity, who trusted her instincts, who outsmarted her abductor, who led detectives to the very house where she was held, who helped catch the man responsible, who inspired changes in state laws, who turned trauma into triumph. Today, her story stands as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope exists, strength exists, courage exists, and heroes can come in the smallest, most unexpected forms. Jeanette is more than a survivor. She is living proof that resilience can rise from tragedy, that bravery can be born from fear, and that no matter how deep the darkness, the light of human spirit can shine through. This has been Beyond the Case, where real stories are told with truth, respect, and purpose. If you found this story powerful, moving, or inspiring, like the video, leave a comment, and hit the subscribe button. Your support helps us bring more real-world stories like this to life. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, sometimes the strongest heroes are the ones who are never expected to be heroes at all.